Hello, hello. This is my artifact episode number 3898 or 90. Sorry, 99 maybe. Okay, 3899. Today's date is February 20, 2026. It's been almost like a night at exactly 10 p.m. All right, so I am kind of like thinking about something very, very I don't know. Okay, yeah. So I always ask one question to myself. Okay, first of all, is that the whatever the stuff that I will gonna say is just my thought process. Okay, yeah, it just what I'm thinking right now. It's completely uncooked. It's completely unfiltered. It's just completely unprepared. Okay, I have this kind of like a thought. I'm kind of like a elaborating in this artifact. Okay, yeah, and also artifact is not to meant to be kind of like a statement. It's just kind of like my thoughts or raw thoughts. Okay, so let's just jump into it. Okay, so first of all is that if I ask question that ki basically is this thing that ki if I wanted to change the world, okay, yeah, can I able to change the world? Like basically if I want to change the world, what what kind of okay, first of all is that ki is any person can able to change the world, or if any person wants to change the person, is if any kind of like a person wants to change the world, what he could supposed to be do, or what kind of like credibility that he has, or what kind of like credibility that he really required to change the world. Okay, yeah. So I'm kind of like somebody try to dig into this particular question. So I'm just try to understand first of all, change the world means what? Are you kind of like a changing world from something to something? No. Let's just say a kind of like a positive approach to the world. Basically is this thing, there is just something wrong and I have to be changed the, okay, yeah, but you cannot change the world. That is not, because world is a far more bigger thing. Okay, yeah. And obviously is this thing that key if you wanted to change good to the world, it is also not possible too. Why? Is because of that key what is exactly good is not exactly right. Means like that key, let's just say that key, if I'm gonna say that key education is a kind of like assembly like a good, okay, yeah, but basically okay, it's a very hard to describe what is exactly good. Okay, because I think that now education is kind of like a bit more right decision for every corner of the world. Okay, yeah, because education is very much essential, and probably I think that na ki this kind of like a field is kind of like considered as the right thing for every corner of the world. Okay, if I went to Africa, China, Russia, anywhere, education should supposed to be a right thing. Okay, whatever. What I'm trying to tell you is this thing. Let's just say that ki I want to change the world. Okay, so what do I supposed to do? Basically is this thing that ki what kind of like some stuff do I really required? Okay, yeah. I think that now from my point of perspective, still I'm not really sure. There are three things really required to change the world, to dominate the world, or to kind of like assembly the kind of like assembly is this thing that ki basically is this thing na ki whatever you want, it happened. Okay, yeah, whatever you want, it happened. Okay, so but that whatever should supposed to be right. It's not meant to be that key kind of like let's kill somebody or things like that. Then that is not gonna possible. Okay, yeah. So whatever meant to be happen, so make sure that thing is meant to be right thing happen. Okay, yeah. So right, but there is also another thing is that key. Okay, still as I mentioned, the right thing is also varies. Okay, still if I'm gonna say that key education is a kind of like a very right thing, but it's a very much kind of like a very much kind of like a things that key is not exactly right. Okay, even if I'm saying education is the right, it's not exactly right in every corner of the world. Why is that? Because each country is a kind of like a different. Each country has a different education system. Each country has a different education level of system. So it's not possible. Like if I'm gonna say that primary schooling is a much more essential, but probably is this thing China have a kind of like a really good primary school, so they don't really need it. Africa really required kind of like a primary education school, but they might have kind of like a corruption and things like that. Like basically is this thing, if I try to execute a kind of like a something really good thing, like let's just say education, I might not execute that well properly because of that key. At some sort of countries, things might goes very smoothly, like a China, India, or kind of like a developing country. But let's just say some countries are not gonna do these things smoothly. Like let's just say that key, kind of like I kind of like give the money to the some sort of country in Africa, they might kind of like for the education, but they kind of like utilize that money for corruption and things like that. Even if I try to make the system as good as transparency and things like that, but still there is a kind of like a loophole we're gonna create and things like that. Okay, so I'm not gonna kind of like criticize any kind of like country, but what I'm trying to realize that ki even if I'm say that thing that ki even if the right thing is still kind of like varies, it's not kind of like a thing is that ki, like as I mentioned, okay, if you want to do right thing, it's not possible, okay, because that right thing will kind of like assembly implement very differently in every corner of the world. Okay, yeah. But what I'm trying to tell you is this thing that key, let's just say a person want to kind of like simply do that thing. First of all, let's talk about that person instead of kind of like simply changing the world and things like that. Let's talk about the person. Okay, yeah, let's talk about the person. So what kind of like simply credibility really required for that particular thing? Like if that particular person want to change the world or whatever it is, what is actually that particular person really required? First of all is that key power. Okay, yeah. Okay, so I'm talking about power means today's standard point of perspective. Okay, yeah. So power in all around the world. Does we have any kind of like a designation that kind of like a rule the entire world and things like that? Like does we have that? No, we do not have. Like we are kind of like have different country, and each country has its own leader. They call prime minister or president, things like that. Okay, yeah. There is no single person who kind of like dominate the entire world. Okay, so there is no designation or actually exist in today's world, and in the future it will not gonna exist too. Okay, yeah. What about United States? Like a UN is a kind of like a union is a body. Okay, is an organization body. Okay, yeah. It does not dominate the country. It does not. It just have kind of like a kind of like a unity that every country kind of like solve the problem together and things like that. UN is not meant to be kind of like a design as a kind of like a dominating power in all around the country. That is not. UN is an organization to solve the problems and things and that and that and that and that. You kind of like meant to say that ki a kind of like a president of United States, oh sorry, a president of kind of like a UN might be kind of like a rule the world, but that is not the case because still UN doesn't really have that much power and things and that and that. So no, UN is not in the sense. So there is no kind of like a designation that actually exists to kind of like consider as a dominate the world. So there is no power at all. Okay. So what is second thing? Like as I mentioned, I think that now from my point of perspective, there are three things really required to change the world. Okay, or there are three things really required to a person who could able to be change the world. Okay, and that particular person have kind of like a three credibility. First credibility is a power. Okay, another credibility is money. Okay, how much money that particular person has. Okay, so money is also possible because in the today's world we have so much amount of people have kind of like so much amount of money too. Elon Musk is a kind of like a person who has a kind of like a almost $700 billion, which is like a so much amount of money, more than the country in itself. So yeah, so okay, having more money could be kind of like somebody credible enough to kind of like somebody change the world. Okay, yeah. And another thing that really required another kind of like a quality or credibility that person really required to change the world, and that credibility would be influence. Okay, yeah, like how much kind of like a influence does that person has to the rest of the world and things like that. Okay, yeah. So let me kind of like give you a couple of, I don't know how I'm supposed to explain or execute things like that. First of all is that power. Okay, yeah. So power is kind of like a designation, right? Yeah, there is no designation or actually exist to rule the entire world, right? Yeah, but what is exactly power? What is exactly power? Let's just understand, let's just define the power. Just define the power. A power means like that you can control people. Okay, you can control people. That is called power. Okay, how do you supposed to be control people? By kind of like a legalization, or by kind of like a constitution, right? Or by kind of like a, by system. Okay, yeah, like a system is a kind of like a, controlling the people. If you are top of that system, then probably you are controlling the people legally, or kind of like a somebody that key legally, or like a, do you understand? Okay, the system can control the people, not their emotion. Emotion is a bit more different. Okay, yeah, practically you are actually controlling the people practically. Okay, that is called power. Okay, means controlling the system. Okay, yeah. So let's just say that Donald Trump is controlling the system of United States, US. Okay, Narendra Modi is a kind of like a person who control the system of India. Okay, so this is what it is. It's a kind of like a, every person has his kind of like a person, but a Donald Trump cannot control Indian system. Why? Because he is not any kind of like a part of any Indian political or things like that. So he does not control the Indian people, or he does not control the Indian system. Okay, right? Get it? Okay. But there is a kind of like a things. If I'm gonna say this thing, there is a kind of like something. There is a no designation is actually exist. Then there is no power, right? Like there is no power, right? But I think that the power is actually come from the people. Okay, power is actually come from the people. Okay, system can be changed. Okay, we build the system for controlling the people, but that system can't be changed, and that change will gonna happen from the people. Okay, yeah. So what I'm trying to tell you is this thing, that key, what kind of like credibility really required a person to change the world is not power. I think is not power. It's like I kind of like change that word power to kind of like assembly influence would be really good word. Okay, let's just understand couple of things. Okay, let's just understand. Okay, I'm gonna kind of like assembly give you example. Okay, yeah, so that you might gonna understand. All right, yeah. So let's just say I am a person, and I kind of like assembly. I have kind of like a money. Let's just say I wanted to dig the hole. Okay, I wanted to dig the hole. Let's just say 1 meter hole. Okay, yeah. And I have 10 people, and I have to kind of like assembly dig the 10 hole. Okay, yeah. I have 1,000 rupees, and each one will get kind of like 100 rupees. Okay, yeah. So what exactly is this thing? Let's just understand this scenario from kind of like assembly point of perspective. Okay, yeah. So I kind of like give them money, 100 rupees, and kind of like tell them that dig the hole for 1 meter. Okay, yeah. All those 10 people are kind of like digging the hole. Okay, yeah. Does people want to dig the hole? No, people don't want to dig the hole. Then why does people are digging the hole? Because of they are getting money. Okay, yeah. So basically what exactly is this thing? I am actually giving them money. So that is called system. Okay, that is called a system. Okay, that is called system. If I will not gonna kind of like give them money, and if I'm gonna say dig the hole, will they able to dig the hole? They will not. Why would they supposed to do this thing? They will not gonna dig the hole, right? Yeah, because they need something in returns. Why would a kind of like some people will gonna kind of like dig the hole for no reason, right? So basically this thing, this is a kind of like a system. You gave the money, they will kind of like do your work. Okay, so that is called a system, right? Understand? Now let's just change the scenario. Okay, yeah, let's just say that key I said, okay, I kind of like say this thing, that key if you wanted to survive, or if you wanted to kind of like make your life much more better, or things and that, you have to kind of like dig the hole. Now people will kind of like assembly digging the hole. Why? Is because of that key, I think digging the hole is a kind of like a some reason for survival, or kind of like a getting better future and things like that. Okay, yeah. So they will gonna dig the hole without money by kind of like a somebody telling them that if you dig the hole, you will kind of like a survive, or you will kind of like a get the better kind of like a better kind of like a simply better life, right? Yeah. But still the question actually asks, still the question actually remain that does people dig the hole? Well, in this particular case, yes, people will dig the hole. But how? Like there is no money involved. I am not kind of like giving them any kind of like money. I'm just kind of like say this thing that like basically this thing that you just have to do it. People did it. But why? Why? There is no money involved. Why? Trust. Okay, yeah. Because people trust me. Okay, yeah. But trust. Why would I suppose to those 10 people will gonna trust me? Okay, yeah. That trust is actually came from a kind of like somebody is this thing that that trust is actually came from the loyalty, or kind of like some things that this particular person will not gonna wrong, or maybe kind of like somebody have positive approach towards the world and things like that. Like basically is this thing now, what I'm saying is this thing that when you have a trust somebody, and when somebody says this thing that dig the hole, then you kind of like dig the hole because of you believe that this particular person says that if you dig the hole, then you might kind of like survive, or you might kind of like get a good life, or things like that and that. Okay, yeah. So you believe, so that those 10 people actually believe in me, and that's why they kind of like started digging the hole. Okay, yeah. So that is, they kind of like did it because of trust. Okay, yeah. That they kind of like did it is because of the trust. Okay, yeah. Now that trust is actually came from what kind of like a value that you provided. Okay, yeah. Now let me tell you value. Okay, let me tell you value. A value means, yes, value means money too. Okay, yeah. But value means other things too. Now other things means what? Like basically is this thing na ki if you did something really right to the people, then people will kind of like simply understand, and they will kind of like simply say this thing that because of you I'm kind of like exist. Like let's just say that I am the doctor, and I kind of like save their life like a couple of months ago. Like those are 10 people who are kind of like digging the hole. I save those people. Like there is a kind of like somebody disease is actually spread, and I kind of like cure them, those 10 people. Okay, yeah. So basically is this thing that I save those 10 people life before. Okay, yeah, before this digging the hole and things like that. Okay, yeah. And they have kind of like somebody trusting me that this particular person is a kind of like a save us and things like that. Okay, yeah. So whatever that particular person says, I will gonna do this thing because I trust that doctor, or maybe I trust this person, or they trust me. Okay, yeah. So basically they kind of like digging the hole. Okay, yeah. So the trust is actually came from a kind of like a simply value. That kind of like what kind of like a value that you provided, that value must be solve their problem. That value must be solve their problem. Okay, yeah. So basically is this thing that is called okay, I'm kind of like try to tell you all those process. Okay, yeah. So basically is this thing, if I kind of like give them money, that is called system. Okay, if I kind of like give them money, they will kind of like dig the hole. Okay, but if I remove that system and I will kind of say this thing that dig the hole, okay, yeah, they will kind of like do it is because of the trust. Okay, yeah, because they kind of like trust me, because of I save them life and things and that they kind of like simply dig the hole and things like that. So what is exactly is this called? That is called influence. Okay, influence. Now influence means what? Influence means a kind of like somebody that you can convince people to do something. Okay, convince people to do something. Okay, but that is also, it comes one very different. Okay, let me also kind of like explain this thing. Okay, if you can convince 10 out of 8 people or 9 people, your convincing rate, you are have really good influence. Okay, if you can convince only 10 out of 2 people, you are not convincing people, so you have very less influence. Okay, so let me give you another example. Okay, same example with the same thing. Okay, so let's just say there are 10 people. Okay, there are 10 people. Okay, do I know those 10 people? Yes, I know those 10 people because I save those 10 people's life. Like there's a disease actually happened, that's why I kind of like save those 10 people life. Okay, so I know those 10 people, as well as those 10 people, they know me and they kind of like respect me, or yeah, right. So basically this thing that if I said something, they might gonna do this, they might gonna dig the hole and things like that. Okay, so basically my influence is right, my influence is kind of like a right, and they kind of like a dig the hole. But let's just say that I am a kind of like let's just say a kind of like a girl who is a kind of like somebody doing a dance with a seductive dance and things like that. Okay, seductive dance and things like that. Like seductive dance means kind of like a revealing dance, that much, whatever. Okay, so probably is this thing, I might not know those 10 people, but those 10 people will gonna know me. I am a girl, I am kind of like doing this seductive dance and things and that and that. So those 10 people will gonna know me. Okay, now if I am say like I am that dancer girl, if I'm gonna say dig the kind of like a 1 meter hole, will those 10 people will gonna dig the hole? They will not. Why? Because of that, even if those 10 people know you, but they will not gonna convince that they will kind of like dig the hole for you. Why? Because yeah, you have a kind of like assembly influence, but that is a wrong influence. Okay, that is a wrong influence, and that wrong influence is kind of like assembly you cannot able to convince people to do something. Okay, like I save them, I am a doctor, I save those 10 people, so I have a kind of like a right influence. So whenever I have right influence, I kind of like assembly convince them to do something. But if I have a wrong influence or kind of like a things, then probably my conviction rate is very less. So when I have conviction rate is very less, people might not gonna dig the hole for me. Probably no one. Okay, get it? Now basically this thing, what does power do? Power is kind of like somebody create a system, like I give them money, you have to dig the hole. Okay, but if you change that thing and kind of like add an influence, then influence is kind of like do the same thing too. Okay, influence kind of like do the same thing too, without money. Okay, but that is not the thing. Okay, that is like this is not gonna possible. Why is that thing? Because if I'm gonna say that that I don't know, I am kind of like a very much confused at the moment. But what I realized that like basically is this thing, I don't know. I think that now I'm kind of like thinking about so like a stupid. Okay, I don't know why I'm actually thinking like that. I don't know, I'm just kind of like stuck in that particular thought process, and this is what I think. I don't know. I'm not really sure, is it right or is it wrong, or is it some sort of, I don't know. It just I'm just kind of like thinking, I just record and stuff like that. Money is money is also kind of like a very much essential for that particular person who want to change the world. But for that money thing, it is also kind of like like basically it is really essential me to kind of like not to talk about stuff that I don't really knew it. Yeah, whatever. So I think I should supposed to end here. This then. It's just raw thought process. Just don't kind of like somebody think as a serious things like that. It's not. All right, this is it. Thank you.